Okay, we're going straight up.
10 seconds.
We're going to go to our slide.
Ready till up.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take it. Announce.
Because of the following special one-hour broadcast, programs previously scheduled at this time will not be seen.
30 seconds on it. Stand by to wipe to the bird, and they can live early bird. Wipe. And you're Mexico is on the line. Mexico is feeding the bird. Light X1. Wipe now. We're on Mexico. And stand by to super and super. And wipe all the way through to the bird. Give me live via early bird, please.
The first satellite ever to maintain constant 24-hour communications between North America and Europe is in orbital position. Its inaugural public demonstration was a live television transmission between the nations of two great continents. Now, men living and working on the ground have sent their minds and their skills into the three-dimensional world of orbital flight, 22,300 miles in space. Only 100 years or so ago, people looked up 20 feet into the air at the wonderful wires that would carry telegraph messages across the continent. This was truly a miracle of communications, the first real step forward in 5,000 years. The first instantaneous two-way communications were made possible by the telephone. Transcontinental phone lines were in operation in 1915. In 1927, transocean service became a reality by tying in phone lines with long-range radio. The first transatlantic telephone cable was completed in 1956, providing a quality of communications almost as good as a local phone call. Then came the rapid development of our space technology. Startling advances in electronics, as well as in rocketry, soon clearly indicated that direct global communications by satellites would be practical. The advantage of satellite communications is height, an advantage which on a smaller scale is the reason microwave relay stations are often located on the highest ground available. Microwaves are very short electromagnetic waves which can carry telephone, teletype, and television communications. Microwaves go in a straight line, called direct line of sight, but a hill in their path will block the signal. So, microwave towers located some 35 miles apart relay signals across the continent. But microwave systems stopped at the ocean's edge until we had communications satellites. The first voice from a satellite to Earth came in 1958. A Christmas message from President Eisenhower carried aboard Project Score.
Through this unique medium, I convey to you, to all mankind, America's wish for peace, honor, and goodwill toward men everywhere.
At most altitudes, satellites will pass in and out of range of Earth stations during their orbital flight. But a satellite at 22,300 miles above the Earth at the equator will be orbiting at the same relative speed as Earth. A simple comparison is of a fixed point on the rim of a wheel, always maintaining its relative position to a fixed point on the hub. In the same way, a satellite in synchronous equatorial orbit at 22,300 miles altitude will always be in direct line of sight of a fixed area below. 3 such satellites could cover the entire globe. It was Telstar I, developed by American Telephone and Telegraph, that provided the first live intercontinental TV transmission. But these transmissions could only be intermittent because in its orbit, Telstar was not always in line of sight of ground stations on both continents. Experimental satellites Syncom II and Syncom III were the first to be injected into synchronous orbits to cover Southeast Asia and the United States. It was via Syncom III that live TV coverage of the Tokyo Olympic Games was transmitted to the United States across a distance of 5,000 miles. Aware of the importance of satellite communications, the Congress on August 31st, 1962, passed the Satellite Act. The act authorized formation of the Communications Satellite Corporation, Comsat, and assigned Comsat the task of establishing and operating a global commercial communication system as soon as possible in cooperation with other nations and companies around the world. In April 1964, the Federal Communications Commission approved Comsat's Early Bird program. For the reliable power to thrust the spacecraft into orbit, the decision was made to use the Thor Delta vehicle developed by the Douglas Aircraft Company. This three-stage booster established a past performance record of 28 successful flights. The satellite itself was to be a logical step beyond Syncom III. Designed and developed by Hughes Aircraft Company, Early Bird is larger and more complex and is in its way a triumph of miniaturization. Preparation for transmission from space also requires preparation in many different places here on Earth. In the United Kingdom, the Earth station is at Goonhilly Downs, one of 4 stations in Europe. In Italy, the station is at Fucino, near Rome. The French station is at Pleymer-Baudu, near the west coast of France. In Germany, their Earth station is at Reisting. The small town of Andover, Maine, is the site for the Earth station in the United States. This station, already tested and proven by Telstar I and II, and leased from AT&T, was modified for the Early Bird mission. This key station was designed to handle command and control communications necessary to place the satellite into its correct orbital position. By July 1965, 46 nations had joined the international consortium. Each member nation pays its pro rata share of operating costs and also shares in the income from the global commercial satellite system. Management of the total system, however, is the responsibility of Comsat. Space systems must be launched on paper long before they reach the launching pad. And before a spacecraft can be placed in orbit, it must first go into orbit on the ground. Electronic simulators provide the necessary checkouts of the various systems and circuits under conditions simulated to represent those that will be encountered during actual operations in space. Early Bird itself is subjected to spin tests, as well as literally thousands of other tests. Reliability has a special meaning in space, where operations should last for years with no way to make repairs. In a gantry at Cape Kennedy, the assembly of the 3 solid motors to the Thor booster means the day of launching is near. Atop the second stage, Early Bird is perched inside the protective nose fairing. And as launch date approached, a special press conference was held. The questions of correspondents from around the world reflected the interest of their vast international audiences. All launch operations are being handled by an experienced NASA Douglas team. NASA's Scientific Satellite Tracking Network, with operations headquarters at Greenbelt, Maryland, will monitor Early Bird during the brief period of powered flight. All data will be direct lined to Comsat Control Center in Washington, D.C. All decisions will be made from here. command and control instructions will be sent to the Andover Earth Station for transmission to the spacecraft. And now, it is only minutes till launch, and counting. A closed-circuit TV line makes it possible for an audience of international leaders and news media reporters to have close-up views of events as they happen. Vice President Humphrey is a special guest of honor. And now, it is 10 seconds, and counting. The camera following the flight path caught a most unusual shot. As the bright comet-like tail turns slightly redder, the 3 solid motors will fall away. As the first stage engine thrusts the vehicle into distance and the night, the satellite called Early Bird will be out of sight of the eyes of men, but not beyond the reach of the minds of men. All phases of injection into orbit have been carefully programmed. After burnout, the first stage separates. Ten seconds later, the protective nose fairing is jettisoned. The second stage engine burns and is cut off at exactly 5 minutes, 14.5 seconds after launch. Now, the vehicle will coast for about 22 minutes. During the first 4 minutes of that time, it will execute required pitch and yaw maneuvers. Then, at the precise moment planned, the vehicle is spun up, and the third stage engine is ignited and allowed to burn for 22.5 seconds to inject the spacecraft into orbit. When the third stage separates, Early Bird, spinning at 152 revolutions per minute, is alone in space in an elongated elliptical orbit with its perigee relatively close to Earth and its apogee some 22,000 miles out. This is only a temporary or transfer orbit, which will be refined into its designated synchronous equatorial orbit. To accomplish that, Comsat Central Control has to determine the exact present orbit, prepare antenna pointing information, and determine the orientation of Early Bird's spin axis. When these computations are completed, checked and rechecked,
Roger, Andover.
they send the reorientation and velocity correction instructions to the Andover tracking station to transmit the necessary commands to the spacecraft.
On my mark, we will execute. We'll give a 10-second countdown. 10, 9, 8.
As Early Bird approaches apogee for the 6th time, its spin axis is now corrected in the proper direction. On command, the spacecraft's apogee motor is fired. Early Bird is thrust into its synchronous equatorial orbit. It will still take several days before it is finally stopped in its small, stationary place in space, and with its attitude adjusted so that the antenna is in a position of direct line of sight for the Earth stations in North America and Europe. Early Bird has been in its orbital position several days now. Operating and system checks are nearing completion.
Andover, Andover, here is Premier Birdu. We are now ready to perform the test number 26.
In Italy, the Earth station is at Fucino, near Rome. Sometimes phrases like striking contrast between old and new can get pretty badly overworked. And yet the image of the past is still reflected in the present. The Reisting station is Germany's ground link with Early Bird. It is interesting that here, fast study language courses are part of the program for the upcoming new era of worldwide communications.
In this room, Mr. Constanti?
In the United Kingdom, Goonhilly Downs, just as other Earth stations, receive signals sent to the satellite which have been amplified by onboard equipment and retransmitted back to Earth. Then, amplified again, they are relayed by microwave transmitters or by telephone lines for distribution through existing systems to bring intercontinental phone calls and TV directly to your home. Now, 240 new telephone circuits, or the equivalent of more than 4,500 teletype lines, are added to the intercontinental network. This not only benefits the immediate interchange of news, but also makes possible data transmissions in great volume. A few twists of a telephone dial can be the routine start of a call traveling through space and across an ocean via satellite. Television antennas will soon be a link between anybody's home and the wonders around the world in which we all live. On May 2nd, 1965, the promise of a global commercial communications satellite system, of which Early Bird is the forerunner, was presented for the first time by an intercontinental live television transmission.
15, check.
10 seconds.
10, 9, 8, 7.
Paneo.
Swipe and wipe it in. And stand by to super and super. And wipe all the way through to the bird. Give me live via early bird, please. Give me live via early bird tell-up. Stand by to super tell-up. Super tell-up.
We're going to see another very historical set of guns in the next part of this transatlantic exchange, because we're in Portsmouth at HMS Victory. But there's something very special about HMS Victory today, because its guests are the Red Navy group of singers and dancers from Russia. Here, Lieutenant Commander Whittingham, in command of HMS Victory, greets the captain in charge.
Everybody who's got a strip with SQ and operate on to we must bring the choir and start to pan down for.
Dancing, although this version of it is called the Sailor's Dance.
been in existence since 19...
And wipe to the bird. Let it dissolve to Houston. Houston feeds the bird. Go ahead, Dick.
5 seconds.
Dissolve to Houston. We're on Houston. Stand by to split.
This is the Texas Medical Center, Houston. And in this operating room that you're about to see at the Methodist Hospital is Dr. Michael DeBakey. Here we are. He is professor for surgery, Baylor University College of Medicine, and senior attending surgeon at the Methodist Hospital.
And you can see that it slips into this metal cage. Now it's slipped into the metal cage, and there's the ball. And you see the bulb now will function in the manner of a normal valve to allow blood to come out of the heart into the aorta, but not to allow blood to go back.
In the past, doctors had to come to Dr. DeBakey's operating theater to watch him work and to learn from him. And now with Early Bird, we have enlarged Dr. DeBakey's amphitheater to encompass the world.
Mes amis, en français, que c'est un cas avec un sténose très grave de l'autre valvule aortique. Nous avons remplacé
The horizons of medical knowledge thus expanded by Early Bird, opening new ways of teaching and learning. So this is the conclusion of our broadcast, inaugurating the transmission of regular live television between Europe and North America. Proceeding from the assumption that men are good and decent, and that their troubles grow from untruths and misunderstandings, this communication facility will serve mankind well. It will serve by making truth and understanding between people easier to come by. Nations know this little thing or that about each other, but essentially they are strangers. Their judgments of one another are formed from the caricature of a trait, the look of a face, or the half-told story of a thing that never happened. If Early Bird and the satellites yet unlaunched can help reveal nations to nations and people to people, this will have been a day.
It was, in fact, only the beginning of many days. On a day in May, the first full-color intercontinental two-way telecast was transmitted. Then, on a day in June, commercial operations for telephone and teletype communications also went into service. In a conference call with statesmen in Europe, President Lyndon B. Johnson said,
"This moment marks a milestone in the history of communications between peoples and nations. For the first time, a man-made satellite of Earth is being put into commercial service as a means of communication between continents. The occasion is as happy as it is historic.
22,300 miles above planet Earth, a tiny man-made 85-pound pinpoint in space is linking hundreds of millions of people thousands of miles apart."